Okay, Professor Martirosyan is interested in Armenian linguistics, but there's a huge tradition since the beginning of the 19th century, really, that nearly all key important students of the Turkish language, or the key lexicographers, theoreticians, have been a very large number of them have been Armenian, and they've produced some very high quality material. And the founder of Armenian modern linguistics, Hrach is also comes from that background. He grew up in a circle, in a social milieu where lots of Armenian amateurs as well as professionals were developing their techniques of studying the Turkish language.
Sevan, could you wait a second? Abi.
Klima sesi yapıyor mu? Klimanın sesini kapatmam lazım.
Okay, it's okay again.
Okay, sorry, the air conditioning was on and it was making a lot of noise. So these were my opening remarks. If you want to add something, please go ahead.
I am also happy to be here, and so as I already said, so it's really wonderful that we are having these discussions, and especially in the field of the origin of the Armenian language, and also relations between Armenian and Turkish. But I think at a later moment, I would like to add, after your main lecture, of course, I would like to add some very minor remarks about the necessity of communicating. So it's very necessary that Armenian and Turkish, also scientific communities have communication with each other, and we can have many examples when there is mutual lack of interest or knowledge of the work of each other. So and I hope in the future we will have more communication, and so I'm going to add some minor remarks after your lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't really have a lecture because I was more under the impression that this would be sort of a dialogue, a conversation rather than a lecture. If you wish, I can present a few ideas. But also, I would like to ask: are you in Yerevan now, or are you somewhere in? Where are you?
No, I'm in Leiden now, in the Netherlands.
In Leiden,
Yes.
Okay.
My
Nice.
home is here. Yeah.
Right. So you are much closer to the center, to the heart of the academic world.
Yeah. Actually, at this moment, I'm in the last month of my Berlin project. So I was working in Berlin with senior fellowship from Humboldt Foundation, working on Armenian and Iranian etymological material. So I'm going to continue this research also. So this would be a sequel to my two etymological dictionaries. So one being the native Armenian vocabulary in 2010, and then working in Vienna in the Austrian Academy of Sciences. I worked on personal names of Iranian origin. So in 2021, this volume appeared in this Iranisches Personennamenbuch, well-known series.
Justi. I mean, you are improving on Justi.
Yes, of course. Yusti is the pioneer in this field, but his material is, of course, much dated and not organized, and a lot of data are already outdated, and some much more and wonderful material has, of course, the prominent Armenian linguist Hrach, who produced these 5 volumes, wonderful dictionary of Armenian personal names. Of course, my task was a much improved and elaborated version of only one part of the onomastic lexicon, that is the names of Iranian origins. So this is over, and now I'm working on the 3rd endeavor, that would be the usual words, that is more than 1,000 roots, which Armenian borrowed from Iranian languages. And of course, in this material, we very often we come through also some Turkish material. So when it becomes necessary to deal with dialectal material or treat the direction of the borrowings of some dialectal words, etc. So,
Okay.
so this is the situation.
Professor Martirosyan, since, as far as I know, our audience is probably not very familiar with any of this material, allow me to explain a little bit what we are talking about, because
my pleasure. Yeah.
First, you mentioned that I mentioned, and you mentioned Hrach, who is a fascinating man, who's really a great intellectual, who lived in the first half, at the beginning of the 20th century. He was from Istanbul, so he was a compatriot of ours. But at a young age, he moved to what was then Russia, the Tsarist Russia, and established there. He produced 3 extraordinary dictionaries. His first work of youth was a dictionary of Armenian dialects. He traveled in various parts of the Ottoman Empire and of the Russian Empire and collected material on dialectal differences of the Armenian language. Secondly, he wrote his great monumental work on the Armenian etymology, which is 4 large volumes. He wrote it in the 1920s and 30s. It's a monumental work. It's an extraordinary work of personal sacrifice.
Amazing
work, because Armenian being a very hybrid language like Turkish, it requires a very broad vision, a very broad command of various languages, since there are the Persian elements, there are the Semitic elements, there are the prehistorical elements, there are the Caucasian elements. And having a full grasp of all these strands is a major achievement, especially for that age. And then later on, after he had lost his eyes, he produced a phenomenal dictionary of Armenian personal names, not just random Armenian names, just let's explain some of these names, but a full index of all Armenian names mentioned in historical sources, so that when you talk about a name like Nerses, he has 250 examples of various Nerseses who have lived in history and how their names were recorded, etc., etc. So this is a seriously crazy man. I mean, who would do this kind of work in this age without much institutional support either? We talked about Yusti, whom I love, whom I just, but it may be outdated, who cares? But I really dabble in it because the names are so beautiful. The old Iranian names are so fantastic, so elegant, so original. Yusti did an extraordinary thing. I think he's German, is he, or Dutch, whatever. In the Iranisches Namensbuch, is that, yeah.
Personennamenbuch, yeah. Turkey Namenbuch, yeah. He's used
Namenbuch.
1895, yeah.
Okay, he gathers all Iranian names mentioned in Persian, Greek, Roman, Armenian, Aramaic, Arabic sources, and Turkish sources, all the Iranian names. It's a fascinating collection. And I'm very glad to hear that you are doing an update on that. So that's the second thing. And thirdly, I would be very interested in your researches in the Berlin project, because the Armenian language has a whole stratum of Iranian borrowings, not even one stratum, but 2, 3 different periods in which a large number of Iranian words were adopted into Turkish, into Armenian. I'm sorry about that. And what are your discoveries? What are some of the interesting things that you found out when you were in Berlin?
Oh, it's difficult to mention just by heart some random examples, but major things would be that the material is extraordinarily huge, big material, both appellatives and also personal names. So now about the plain vocabulary. So as I mentioned earlier, so it's more than 1,000 roots, and I'm dealing with all these periods. The main names which are attested until 13th century, because the whole would be really extremely physically impossible task, because also in last centuries there are so the Armenian Academy produced many volumes of colophons or inscriptions, and if you look at the index, so the names come, so in tens, into hundreds, and so you can't even imagine how rich the material is. But of course, most important are all these layers. And first of all, I would like to mention that study of Armenian corpus of Iranian names and words. So at this stage, maybe we should concentrate on appellatives, on normal words. It's very important for not only Armenologists, but also for Iranists and Indo-Europeanists, because as I mentioned the day before yesterday, in the time of my lecture, a huge amount of words have disappeared from Parthian or Middle Persian, and sometimes even in the whole Iranian world. But Armenian, borrowing them 2,000 years ago or a little bit more, so starting with from Parthian Arshakuni, Arsakid, Arsacid dynasty, Armenian preserved all these words, which are consequently lost in all or in many Iranian languages. So this is one amazing thing which makes the Armenian field very important for outside, for the scholarship outside of purely Armenian interests. So and the other thing is that Armenian very often helps to reconstruct the vocalism of the word, because in old languages we usually are dealing with the writing systems which lack short vowels. So only long vowels are written, and so very often we don't know how the word actually sounded. And in many cases, Armenian comes to help and to reconstruct the actual form. And an amazing example would be a classical example that Sanskrit has a word for slumber or for sleep, nidra, and the expected Iranian form would be nithra. and which is totally absent in the whole Iranian world. But Armenian has borrowed a Parthian form of that, or Middle Iranian form of that, in the shape Nish, Nish, and which is exactly what we would expect from an Iranian brother form of Sanskrit Nidra. So this triangle is methodologically extremely important. So it's really fascinating, because not a single Iranian word preserves this, and but Armenian preserved it in a wonderful way. And so this is just a classical example. There are hundreds of such words which are either entirely or partially absent from the Iranian world, but with the strict methodology, we can prove that it was present in Parthian or in Middle Persian, and Armenian borrowed it, but the others are lost. There are also some semantic domains in which Armenian material is really huge, like religious vocabulary. Of course, we are talking about pre-Christian and as far as the Persian is concerned, pre-Islamic oldest layer of religious vocabulary, a significant part of which in both sides come from Indo-European. But then all these domain of these terms from this religious domain have been heavily influenced in Armenian by Iranian, and in Iranian by Arabic through Islamic material, of course. But the relationship between these two layers concerning in pre-Islamic and pre-Christian stages, so it helps to discover a lot of lost things and to make a lot of etymological, wonderful etymologies and corrections in the historical data.
This is very fascinating. Again, to remind our audience who are not professionals of this field, except for Nezih, one person there I see who has a special interest in Sanskrit and Iranian languages. But most of our attendees will not know much about this subject. There's a fact, the very interesting fact, that the Iranian Empire was a huge affair since the 6th century before Christ. It was a great civilization. Its geography extended from one end of the world to the other end. Yet it produced very little in terms of written documentation until the Islamic times. Whereas the Armenians, who were a small and largely insignificant little kingdom on the margins of the Iranian world, produced a disproportionate amount of written material, so that in order to study old Iranian, pre-Islamic Iranian, you have to go, you are obliged to go largely to Armenian sources, because the Armenians wrote it down, the Iranians didn't. How do you explain this fantastic fact? Because really the comparison of size and importance between the two is just disproportionate. The Armenians are small and poor and politically weak, yet they somehow found the time and the opportunity to write all this down.
Yes, so in the 5th century we had this golden age, so Bosque d'Arc, and it really justifies its traditional name. But so it was an explosion of culture, and it produced a lot of wonderful works which are extensive in size and value also. And so we have what we have, and we are fortunate about that. So it's a huge treasury, of course. But before I forget, allow me to add also another important dictionary of Hrach that is in 1902, Turkish borrowings in Armenian dialects. So
I haven't I haven't.
So this is in 1902, and yes, it's Turkerene Pokharyal Baresh, Hayren Barbarneri Mech. So Turkish loan words in Armenian dialects. So he, of course, concentrate on first his mother dialect, that is Polso Barbar, the dialect of Polis, Constantinopolis, that is Istanbul, but systematically including also data from three other major and important dialects, that is Nor Nakhichevan, Van, and easterly located, so very important, Karabakh, so which is in well-known Nagorno-Karabakh region, that is Armenian historical Artsakh, right? So the three of these dialects are in western part, Polis, Van, and Nor Nakhichevan is of course northerly located, but dialectally it's very close to Rodosto, Polis, Nicomedia, etc., etc. So the western Turkish areas, but then also easterly located this Artsakh or Karabakh dialect. So this is another very important thing, and 4,000 words. Can you imagine? So concentrating only first on his mother dialect, that is Polis. So he gathered 4,000 borrowings from Turkish into Polish dialect, and whenever there are corresponding forms in the other three dialects, then he systematically mentions also this. So this dictionary is also available in the famous Nairi.com site, so you can.
I use Nairi all the time, but somehow I never noticed that. Or
yes,
maybe
yes.
I forgot.
Yeah. So I'm sure you forgot. So if you look at the subsection of foreign dictionaries, so if you scroll down, then you will certainly find that. And so Turkerene Pokharyal Baresh.
Very nice. A couple years ago, I spent some time on, what's his name, Briggs or somebody, an American missionary who in 1820s or 30s published a dictionary of all the words in Armenian that he could, in current Armenian, that one cannot find in classical Armenian sources. So
can you name him again?
Briggs or Rix, something like that.
Riggs, R-I-G-G-S, of course. Ashkharabar. So it's a collection. It's a very interesting collection of Ashkharabar Barer. That is, you know, Ashkharabar is modern. Yeah, of course, yeah.
So what he did, to explain it to our friends, this man in Izmir sat down and spoke with the Armenians, and this was before the great educational reforms of the Armenian society, so that the Armenian that was spoken at the time was largely half and half Turkish. It was very much a mixed language. So he made a dictionary of all the degraded words in Armenian, all the words that are not part of the classical language. It's one of the most fascinating sources on the Turkish language, on the Turkish vernacular of the 1830s, as gathered from, as collected from the Armenian speakers.
These early dictionaries are really so very interesting and very useful because they all contain words which skip the attention of scholarship. I mean, the old historians or learned authors, right? So we have classical tradition, which is very rich, abundant, and wonderful, of course. But so this is concentrated on the literary tradition, on the classical tradition. But of course, next to this, in rural areas, in the whole Armenophone territories, we had also other dialectal treasuries, other cultural layers, etc. And these were largely out of the scope of this scholarship, of this classical scholarship. But the dictionary which you mentioned, it's not alone, of course. So we have even earlier and fascinating dictionaries like Francisco Rivola in 1620. So it's an amazing collection of, again, very regional, so both native Armenian, but also borrowing. So it's a real treasury, and a lot of words which are which could not take place in the classical literature, like for example, words which are subject for taboo, right? For example, sexual erotic terms or body part terms, etc. So you cannot imagine that classical authors would mention these words, although these words are in the Armenian language from the Indo-European roots. So the basic words for these sexual body parts, for example. But they are totally absent from literature. And then we have such interesting dictionaries which are compiled by so to speak, non-classical person, or sometimes even not very
literate.
Literate as far as grammar, the classical language is concerned. But then they recorded what they heard, what they could. Sometimes their informants were from Western Armenian dialects, and so these authors, these lexicographers sitting somewhere in Europe, they recorded these words and they made a wonderful field work for us, because we cannot imagine such field work having done by the Republic of Armenia proper, or these modern periods, for those far centuries, and for the areas which are very remote from Armenia proper, right? So then we have this Francisco Rivola, we have this famous Othon dictionary, which is even older. Then we have this King's dictionary, very famous, hexaglot, in 6 languages, Armenian, Arabic, Greek, etc., etc. So this famous hexaglot, I mean, yes, there are a lot of such amazing dictionaries, and so they help a lot to fill gaps in classical literature and literary tradition.
Yes. We mentioned nairi.com, which is a fascinating, a wonderful resource. And unfortunately, we don't have anything comparable to it in Turkish yet, or many other languages either. Who is it? Who is behind nairi.com? I have no idea. Is it a government organization, or is it?
If I'm not mistaken, so this is financed by Gulbenkian Foundation, but I'm sorry if I would appear to be mistaken, but and I think one of the most important persons involved in organization of these things is Serush Urishyan. So I know him from Facebook, and then I met him also once. So I think they continue digitizing important dictionaries, and so this they already have more than 130 dictionaries. So it's really amazing. So it's very important site.
This is a website, freely accessible website.
Yes, really.
130, I would say about 100, whatever, 130 dictionaries, starting from the 18th century, really old dictionaries, and has them all in a searchable PDF form online. So it's an extraordinary resource tool. It's a great, it's a boon. It's a bonus for a researcher.
Yes, of course.
Language. Yeah. And of course, I have to deal with similar material in the Turkish language. There are hundreds of dictionaries and word lists that I have to deal with and search them in the chaos of my own file system. I really wish somebody would do such a service, such a great service to the public, by publishing a whole number of old dictionaries. Of course, there's one big disadvantage that Turkish has in this respect, and that is the change in the alphabet. The old alphabet and the new alphabet, because almost nobody, very few people in the younger generations who will use this material is familiar with the old alphabet, in the old Turkish alphabet. And even if they are familiar, they're not used to working with it in a fluent way. So that it is very difficult to establish a similar corpus like Nairid.com in the Turkish language. That's a big disadvantage.
Yes, but it's a must. I mean, this has to be done somehow. It's really very important. By the way, Armenian also has a corpus of Eastern Armenian texts, really amazing and huge corpus. And you search by a word, and you find all attestations from 19th century concerning Armenian literature of the modern period. So these people are working now on classical Armenian and also in Western Armenian. But for Eastern Armenian, it's called Arevak. It's ready and already for more than 10 years. So we are using that. It's very useful. You can even search through grammatical forms. I mean, yes, so, with grammatical analysis, etc. So you can sometimes you find every data about a certain word which you need only from this corpus. So they are enlarge this.
I wish they would have a corpus like that of classical Armenian texts.
Because they are working on that. So there is a wonderful scholar, Victoria Khurshudyan, who is working on this subject, and then also some good Armenologists. Yeah.
I spent the last 8-9 months translating Eprikyan's Pınashkarik Pararan into Turkish. It's now ready, finished. And since Eprikyan is an unfinished work, it has a lot of lacuna, I made the crazy decision to complete it using his sources. In other words, using Incician and Alishan and Mirakhoryan and Sylvanstians, and more or less complete the dictionary to its alphabetical order. It's such a deep pain in the neck. It's such a difficult thing to research place names in classical sources. Because the sources do not exist in any homogeneous way. You have to look at 19th century prints and go through their indexes. The spelling is in a chaos and all that. So a corpus, a digitalized, fully searchable corpus of all the texts in a given field is such a big service to humanity. Somebody must do it.
Yeah, of course. And as you mentioned, also place names. The Armenian place names is a field which is the poorest, actually, because personal names have been already heavily studied, and this 5 volumes wonderful dictionary of Acharyan, and before him we talked about Yusti, and Hübschmann produced a wonderful collection of onomastic of the personal names, but the place names, unlike personal names, are really a very weak spot on the Armenology, because we still don't have a recent etymological dictionary. So the only thing which we have from place names is Hübschmann's 1904 in German, which is translated in Armenian, Hinayot's Tervo Anunera, the Hübschmann, in 19...
Very limited, very It's just the beginning of work.
Yes, of course. So it's methodologically wonderful. Huffman is, of course, a giant, and so this is a very nice book, but it's very old already, and it's only one poor piece of the real corpus. The Armenian Academy produced 5 volumes, very good, very rich, 5 thick volumes, Տեղանունների Բառարան, but it has no. It's a good collection, but it has no
no etymological,
no etymology, no historical data, and nothing about sources and literature. So nothing. Only
it's a masterpiece of Soviet style academicism.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yes. It's a big disappointment. Of course, many people justifiably say that okay, so this was not the task of those scholars, so they didn't plan to do such a dictionary. Yes, but why make so huge expense and endeavor and having 3 wonderful academicians from different fields, one about the sources, one linguist, Hovannes Barserian, the others very good specialist in sources, Melik Bakhshian, and then historical geographer Tatevos Hakopian. So in different academic institutions. So why wouldn't this collective big undertaking would cover this field? Acharyan covered alone such big, huge fields. So why in modern times it was not possible to make it with the help of academical institutions to make a real thing?
It's the style, the smell of the style, which I hate so much. It's the bureaucratic style. It's the formalism, the ignorance hidden under a formalistic layer. There are too many mistakes in it. It's just a fascinating number of mistakes, especially in the modern material. That's the 19th century material. The locations of small villages, rivers, mountains, whatever. It's,
yes, I agree.
Poor work, camouflaged by a gray bureaucratic language. It's such the opposite of what Acharyan did. Acharyan is an individual. He is an individual genius who makes a lot of mistakes, but when you find his mistakes, you forgive them because he's honest. Other guys are not honest.
He is not. He was not a man. He was an institution.
No, he was a man. That's the important thing. It's better not to be an institution. I don't like institutions.
No, I'm talking about his capacities.
Okay, his capacities.
Capacities and coverage of institution, of course. So this is what I mean. So he has done work of many institutes.
Okay, Mr. Martirosyan is the author of a very important dictionary. How do I say it in English? The Armenian Inherited Lexicon, etymological dictionary of the Armenian Inherited Lexicon. In other words, of the original Armenian vocabulary, not the adopted words from Persian, from Greek, etc., etc. The original, the core language of the Armenian, the core vocabulary of the Armenian language. It's the last rung of a chain of important dictionaries, which starts with Acharyan and ends with you, I understand. Will you tell us a little bit about what is new, what you have added to the existing scholarship of Armenian etymology?
Several points can be mentioned here. The one is that Acharyan's dictionary was not available for European and American, for Western scholarship, let's put it that way, because it is in Armenian.
It's in Armenian.
Yeah, of course. Armenologists used it a lot, and they helped to make this material available to Western scholarship, but not everything. I mean, so the words attested, for example, in 5th century most important historians, or in the Bible, so they found their audience easily, right? Because they are in concordances, and also people can get access to these words, then can make inquiry to ask about these words to several Armenian friends or colleagues. But if they don't know about these words, if they are attested in Grapar, but not in famous like Moses Khorenatsi, Agathangeros, and a couple of others, most important ones, and not in the Bible, but the word does not have to be attested in solely on these words in order to be important. So every word is important, and a lot of huge amount of such words remained out of the scope of Western scholarship, although they found the place in Acharan Armada Kamparan. But again, so not every scholar can dig in the corners of this dictionary, and so one of the major tasks of my dictionary was to make all the layers of reliably or hypothetically native Armenian words, make them available to Western scholarship. So this was one important thing. And then Acharyan's etymological dictionary reflects roughly the state of affairs of 1930s. We can say that it's almost 1 century has passed, and so a lot of new texts, new words, new attestations, new etymologies, new etymological methods, new dialectal material, which helps very often to clarify meaning and form of this or that word, etc. So a huge amount of new data. Of course, we shouldn't forget that my dictionary covers only one part. So as you, of course, mentioned, so only words which are native Armenian or supposed or allegedly native or reliably native. So only one part of the most important part of the Armenian lexicon. The other major importance was inclusion of dialectal material, as Acharyan did. So Western etymologists, even the huge ones. This point I wouldn't like to give names, but even several such prominent scholars, judging upon my dictionary, they said that it's not necessary to make a dialectal section, because the etymological dictionary is about the literary attestations. So 5th century, 7th century, etc., to give chronology, estimation of the semantic development, etc. So why should one include dialectal material? So this I find really ignorant and not acceptable. Acharyan realized that dialectal section is a must for etymological entry. So he structured wonderfully his word lemma, 5 possible fields. One is philological part, that is attestations, meanings, information about the cases, the nominative, genitive, which declension class, or if it's a word, verb, which conjugation type, etc., etc. Second is etymological part. Third is very important, history of etymologies. And fourth is the dialectal. It's very rich. So he not only produced 8 full monographs of individual dialects, but he also traveled practically in all the dialectal regions, and within a couple of weeks. So he had a wonderful method, so very speedy, very rapid method of describing the dialect or subdialect within a couple of weeks. Yes, he had to do it in haste. So you also mentioned justifiably that sometimes he has minor omittings or mistakes, etc. But everyone has that. But apart from this, Archaran worked exhaustively. I mean, so he without any pause. So he traveled everywhere. He gathered all the data. So and he understood the importance of this dialectal material. And so working in such a speed, in haste, of course, he can have his shortcomings, but a lot of things which he described there, now it would be otherwise lost. We know why and how during this very tough decades, of course. So I, following Acharyan and justly to my conviction, included a dialectal section also, and so without the dialectal material, one cannot make an etymological dictionary, especially for such a language as is Armenian. And because literature, literary attestations can testify the knowledge of certain authors about this word, and sometimes, of course, it's general knowledge. So the words are really incorporated in Armenian itself, but sometimes we find 3 or 4 attestations for a certain classical word, and we are not sure whether the word was really incorporated in the Armenian-speaking world, or it was just the knowledge of several authors. In this respect, we have dialectal material to come and give the essential answers. If we find this word not only by this couple of Grapar historians, but also we find, for example, in the dialect of Syunik or Karabakh in one hand, and in Sassoon or in Polis on the other, or in Sebastia or in Hamshen, then you are there. So then we are completely sure then this was a really existent and incorporated word, starting with classical period, and it was spoken by the ordinary people, but also by learned people. So this is one of the major reasons why we should systematically include also dialectal material. And so I tried to fill this gap also and to bring this knowledge to Western scholarship, because again, after Acharyan, already for 70 or 80 years, these data were only sporadically being mentioned in the etymological literature. Yeah, so there are some other points also, but so these are the main things, and yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I would like, at this point, I'm interrupting. I would like to ask Mr. Nişanyan also to explain like the task of his works, and also we would really want to learn about the process itself, like how did the process went through, and so we can listen to you for like 15 minutes uninterrupted, so we are with you.
What's the question again? I didn't get it.
We would like to learn about the tasks of the aims of your works, as well as the writing process and your work in general. What would you like to add on these?
I'm not a linguist by training. I've studied philosophy, I've studied history. But from a young age, like most Armenians of my background, I knew a few languages fairly well. And then in university, I studied Latin, I studied classical Greek, I studied Arabic. So that I had a fairly good sense of how different languages work, etc. My etymological dictionary started as a very amateur work. I was thinking of a little popular book about some interesting etymological facts. This was in 1995. Little did I know that it would turn into my life's project. Gradually, it solidified into a serious project. Gradually, I was forced to learn about etymological methods, about the Indo-European literature, about much more importantly for Turkish, the Semitic grammatical tradition, which is a very important element of the Turkish language, because there are more than 4,000, maybe 5,000 Arabic words which are currently in use in the Turkish language. And the full analysis of the Arabic adopted vocabulary requires a fairly sophisticated knowledge of the Arabic linguistics, which is something which is extremely unfashionable in Turkey. Nobody in Turkey with a modern mindset, with a scientific mindset, ever learns the Arabic language. By accident, in the United States, as a matter of fact, at Yale University, I had some good teachers, so I became interested in Arabic. I had to develop at least some fundamental understanding of the Persian language. I had to acquire at least a basic understanding of the Mongolian language in order to really grasp the structure of the Turkish vocabulary. I published it was really a big act of foolish courage. In 2002, I published the first edition of my dictionary. It was praised to the skies by everybody, but except by myself. I hated it because there were so many mistakes in it. And at that point, I couldn't leave the job, so I had to go on and study more and read more. I spent a year in prison at the time for political reasons, which was a wonderful opportunity, really, because you can work net 14 hours a day in the library, and I had access in the prison. I had access to a library, good library. So I had to keep working on it until sometime around 2005, I realized my big mistake, which is that without philology, you cannot do etymology. You have to have a full record of attestation. When does this word appear? In what context does it appear? What are its various meanings, and how have its meanings? How has its semantic field evolved over the years? So that was the next big stage in my research. There are really very few resources that you can use in Turkish for that, because there isn't a corpus of old texts. I had to create it myself and study all the texts that I could put my hands on from the 8th century. Turkish is a younger language than Armenian. Its earliest written evidence comes from the 8th century, and its earliest full textual extent comes from the 11th century. Before that, we don't know much about the Turkish language. So starting from that all the way until the current day, I had to go through an enormous amount of Turkish texts, go through their indexes, go through their digital versions, so that I could develop a good sense of the attestation history of the words. So in 2009, what I would like to think of as the first definitive edition of the dictionary came out. It was about 3 times as thick as the original, with a lot of historical material incorporated into it. And then I went to jail once again and spent 3 years working on my dictionary, so that a new edition, which is almost twice as thick, came out in 2018. I keep working on it. It's fully available online, so that, and it is being used by an enormous number of people typically on a given day we have about 200,000 searches in the dictionary, which means that I get into a lot of feedback. I get a lot of feedback, both from common people as well as from scholars about my mistakes, about alternative points of view. And I develop the dictionary day by day, constantly, so that by this point it has become a fairly reliable academic reference work, basically the only one that exists in Turkish. Of course, the big problem here is the following. The Turkish inherited lexicon, in your words, constitutes actually a very small percentage of the Turkish vocabulary. It's a very, let's call it, overdeveloped and overdetermined language. It has an enormous number of foreign vocabulary in it. The Turkic nucleus is fairly small. However, the academic tradition, the academic linguists of Turkish are only interested in the Turkish nucleus. So that when I follow the tracks of the modern Turkish language and devote maybe, 10%, 20% to the Turkic inherited vocabulary, a lot of people get very upset with me. They think that I'm betraying the nation. This is not real Turkish. Well, it is real Turkish because this is the language that we speak. This is the language that we write. This is the sort of language that we've written for the last 700 years. It's an imperial language. It's not an ethnic language. It's an imperial language. This is the sort of debates that I sometimes get into, although lately I'm no longer getting into any debates with anyone, especially with nationalists of any nation. Oh, forget it. So that is the etymological dictionary, which is now grudgingly acknowledged to be the only serious source on Turkish etymology. When my dictionary came out, the Turkish Türk Dil Kurumu, the language institution of the state, they were very upset with me, so they decided to publish an etymological dictionary of the Turkish language. They appointed someone to prepare it, and that person was unable to do it, so he resigned, and they appointed someone else, a more intelligent person, a woman whom I like and with whom I correspond frequently. But so far it has been, 22 years, and they haven't been able to come up with anything, which is extraordinary, I think. Then there was the second project in 2010. My publisher at the time suggested that I do something quick about old place names in Turkey. There's no reliable list of all the place names that were changed during the Republican period, during the 20th century in Turkey. Absolutely none. I mean, I'm sure the Interior Ministry doesn't have a reliable list either. It's just, the political history is just too complicated, so nobody actually bothered with it. The big name change operation took place in the 1960s, and that is more or less recorded. But before that, there are all sorts of, it starts in 1913, under the late Ottoman Empire, when hundreds of place names were changed. Then there was a period when Turkey was inundated with refugees from all over the empire. And they established almost 1,000 new villages. And their names are a total chaos because these names changed frequently during the first several years. And then after in the 1920s, there were several things. Several new provinces were acquired. Kars was acquired. Hatay, the Antakya was acquired, and there were name changes in these places. There's no way of finding a collection of these changed names. I thought, okay, this is simple enough. I'll do it in 3 months. I got it, and that was the second big millstone that has been around my neck since 2010. Because toponymy is a fascinating topic. It's a bottomless pit. First of all, unlike appellatives, toponyms have an extraordinarily large number of variants. Toponyms are written in all sorts of ways. And secondly, the same toponyms are used differently in various local languages. In other words, a place is called one thing by the Turks, another thing by the Greeks, another thing by the Armenians. And fully grasping the theoretical structure, in other words, how do you present this? What are the possible variations? Is something that takes time. Localization becomes a huge problem because the material, for example, in that Soviet dictionary of Armenian place names, the localizations are all wrong because they did not have reliable maps. They didn't have Google. They have to, you can pinpoint the location of a name. After working on that for a couple editions, I became more and more aware once again of documentation of the attestation history. In other words, the old name of this place is so-and-so. Who says? According to which source? So now I have a 900 item bibliography associated with the place names of, exactly what source, which tax ledger, which map gives what name. And the more sources you have, the more variants you have. Some of these names can have 20 different spellings. Once again, I'm using Armenian sources extensively, perhaps more than I should, because the old script, the old Turkish script, is especially unsuited for place names, because most of these place names have no sense in Turkish. They are ancient names. God knows where they come from. But they're trying to write it in the old script. And in the old script, it's difficult to understand what is the original pronunciation. Armenian sources give us the vocalization, which is very important. So that was the second project. I'm spending even more time on it right now. After 13 years, I'm still working on it extensively. I devote at least an hour every day to my place names dictionary. It's gotten totally out of hand. It's again online, so that you can find all these places directly on the Google map. And since, for historical reasons, since I'm researching place names, I had to also include, after a while I realized I had to include at least northern Greece, Macedonia, Bulgaria, all the way to Kosovo, and also Armenia in the database, because otherwise it's incomplete. There are some place names, Turkish place names, which, there are 3 examples of that place name in Turkey, but there are also 4 more examples of it in Bulgaria, for example. Or an Armenian name, for example, Arinç. There are about 7 Arinçes in Turkey, but there are then another dozen in Armenia. You have to mention this fact. So that has become another monster in my hands. Oh, merhaba, hoş geldiniz. Marcel Erdal has just arrived. Finally, 2 years ago, I thought to complete the series, I have to also do an onomastic dictionary, which is really, once again, I fell into that trap of thinking I could finish it in 6 months, and I'm still working on it hard. One important source, the key discovery in that field is that on the internet now they have a full ledger of all Turkish names registered since some point in the 19th century. All citizens, as well as foreigners resident in Turkey. 100 million names, including mother's name, father's name, birthplace, and birth year. This is an extraordinary source material. And using some modern digital tools, you can come up with something that has never before been attempted. In other words, come up with the full spectrum of not Turkish names, but names of Turkey, including all the Armenian names, Kurdish names, Greek names, all the Georgian and Romanian and Turkish Arabic. In other words, in the south of the country, there's a large Arabic community. So the names of all Turkish citizens. There are actually 220,000 different names employed in Turkey, but for the dictionary, I reduced this to about 90,000. I eliminated the singular names, and I've been working on it extensively. And right now, all day today was spent online with my computer, my website friend who is now in Chicago. And the onomastic website has been online for more than a year now, a year and a half. Also, it's very, very popular. Now, within the next couple of weeks, I think we'll come up with a radically new version, a completely new version. We've been working on it.
On behalf of the class, I would like to thank you both for your works. At this point, Mr. Erdal was here for the entire session, and I think he has some questions to add, so I'm giving the floor to him.
Yes, I listened to both of you, and I just have one question to Professor Martirosyan. Did you meet any Hazar loanwords in Armenian, or are there no more that's from the Hazar language of the Hazar state? That was one question. Concerning what Professor Nişanyan said, Old Turkic started not in the 11th century, but Old Uyghur has about 10,000, at least 10,000 manuscripts from the 10th century, and there is now the dictionary of Wilkins, which shows that the dictionary of Clausen only had a very, very, very small part of Old Turkic lexicon. So there is one other etymological dictionary which appeared a few years ago by from Poland, Stachowski. Stachowski, and I wrote a very negative review of that, strongly negative review, because he actually did not know Old Turkic, did not treat Old Turkic. So if you don't, when you're working on the etymology of modern Turkish, you can read in my review of Stachowski's dictionary how very, very important it is to also work on Old Turkic. I use mostly your dictionary, which is really the best which I know. You were mentioning a lady who, did you mean who was working for the Türk Dil Kurumu? You mean Hatice Şirin?
Yes.
She may come here to meet me, perhaps tomorrow or Saturday. She
Oh,
I
give
have
her my regards. Give her my regards. We have
She's
many
coming
differences, but I like her very much.
She's coming here, but one thing we still don't know, they've thrown her out. Since January, she's not in charge of that anymore, which is very sad. The reasons are not very clear, but I am also very active in the Türk Dil Kurumu dictionary. And I have to tell you that there are many, many important people doing very, very, very important work on the documentation of the, the earliest documentation of all sorts of the new use of words. So when that, it's very slow. Now it's in the letter B, but there is really serious work. It's really serious work. And I think that once it's finished, it will be very useful. That's what I want to say.
Good. Thank you. So shall I, or maybe Professor Martirosyan?
Perhaps we
But
start
I had
with
my question about Khazar.
I'm sorry to say that, but if you are talking about Khazars, yeah, so the Turkic ethnic element, but I was never doing any work in that direction. So unfortunately, I don't have anything to say because so there's generally there are not many Turkic loanwords in Armenian. There are many. So I'm talking about general context, right? So about the large context. So in modern Armenian literary tradition, there are a few dozen of such words. The origin of which is not very clear, but they are certainly of Turkic origin, like sausage word yershik, for example, or yelak, strawberry, or this kind of words, not very many. Unlike from literary tradition, in dialects, we have huge corpora borrowed mutually, of course, from Armenian dialects into Turkish ones and vice versa. But if specifically about Khazars, there is no, to my knowledge, there is no such field specifically, and so I can't say more about this. So maybe later there will come something up. But so there are of course certain relationships, several mentions of Khazars, even starting with Moses Khorenatsi and more in 7th century or later. But to my knowledge, again, there is no linguistic material which was specifically discussed in this direction. Right now, I have to confine myself on this.
Yana geçeyim yine.
Mr. Nişanyan.
Yes, what I said was that the earliest written documentation of Turkish is from the 8th century, but the first extensive literary work is from the 11th century. Of course, Professor Erdal is right. The Uyghur material, which falls in between the two, is a field on which I'm not sufficiently familiar, let's say. And I wasn't aware of the dictionary that you mentioned, because working with the Uyghur material, the big handicap, of course, is that apart from Clausen, you don't have a corpus available. You don't have a compendium of the Uyghur material, or you didn't until recently. There was that German series of the dictionary, of the Uyghur dictionary, which started, Klaus Röhrborn or something. I'm very bad at remembering names. And they just published the first volume and did not go on. I'd be interested in taking down the name of that dictionary that you just mentioned of the Uyghur material.
Again.
Duyuluyor mu?
Duyuluyor.
Jens Wilkens. Wilkens, W-I-L-K-E-N-S. And that
Wilkins. Okay.
Wilkens. And that can be freely downloaded. It doesn't cost any money. You can just download it freely. And it's a huge, huge dictionary.
That will be extremely useful for me.
And now the dictionary of Hrach is very old. There are several people now continuing it. It's not stopped. It's going on. And the loan words, for example, are now in the third letter. It will take a long time, another 20 years. But Wilkens is also working in this dictionary of Hrach. So actually, all the Uyghur material known to me or to anybody else is in this dictionary of Wilkens, which is much, much, much more than Clausen.
Wonderful. That is very good news. And I will certainly make sure to look at it and see how much time I can spend on it and enrich my dictionary. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, one thing I want to say about the dictionary, it's German and Turkish, but the Turkish is not reliable. Turkish has lots and lots of mistakes because they translate it from the German, sometimes not understanding the context, and so you should use the German.
I'm comfortable with German. I can work with German. So thank you for the information, and good luck and all the best for your work at the.
You know, I published my. I published my. You know, in '91, my Old Turkic word formation. I am nearly finished with the second edition, which will appear this year and is about double the size. Has all the material, including the material from Wilkens, in Turkish.
Ah, good.
Turkish, not English, and
Not in English.
including all the volume of material, of the Uyghur material, which was published till now, actually.
Wonderful. Excellent. Good work. I really wish that the Turkish Language Institution would have the courtesy or the decency actually to consult me as well on some of the matters, because although I'm not really an expert on Old Turkic material, I mean, that's really beyond my specialty, the acquired vocabulary of Turkish is my specialty, and I really suspect that I know more about it than just about anybody else in the field. So I'm really surprised that the Turkish Language Institution actually attempts to write a comprehensive dictionary of the Turkish historical and etymological material without any input from the one person who has done serious publication in that field. And I really wonder why that is.
First of all, I always mention your dictionaries. Secondly, you agree at one point that Turkish Turkologists don't learn Arabic. They also don't learn Greek. They certainly don't learn Armenian, and they don't learn Kurdish.
And they hardly learn French either.
Yeah. But I'm trying to help them. So
good luck. It's an uphill battle, I think. So Professor Martirosyan thus became acquainted with some of the backbiting and internal infighting in the Turkish linguistic field.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Nişanyan? So I was wondering, what is your opinion about Sevortian's dictionary? So again, it's an interesting fact that there is yet another etymological dictionary of Turkish, and again, the authors are Armenian. But unfortunately, he could not finish it, of course. But so in general, what is your opinion about the dictionary?
I haven't used it much. I'm familiar with it, but it's in Russian, for goddamn, and I don't speak any. Russian, and that is an important handicap. And I've used Radlov extensively. I find it very useful, and the contributions of Sevortian, I don't know much about. I'm sorry to say.
Okay, and also there is another etymological dictionary of.
Sorry to interrupt. At this point, Mr. Erdal has a point to add.
Can I say something about Sevortian's dictionary?
Yeah.
Of course, I'm very curious, but yeah.
Tatul, why don't you get Professor Erdal sit here, because we cannot hear you very well from distance. Hello?
I just told
Hello.
you there's this.
I think we all froze.
I'm listening. I can hear every of you.
Do you hear right now?
Can I say something now?
I can hear you very well.
Okay.
You can hear me.
I think the problem is with Mr. Nişanyan. Let's wait a second. Is your internet okay, Mr. Nişanyan?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear?
But not
Better.
Nişanyan. Yeah.
Is it okay?
Nişanyan again.
What?
Okay.
I had this massive negative review of the dictionary of Stachowski, and I think the reason could be orthodox. And the reason is that Stachowski massively used the dictionary of Sevortian. I don't have a good opinion of the dictionary of Sevortian. Died many years ago, so it was continued by other people.
Yeah.
I think all the errors and all the mistakes of Stachowski when doing Turkish etymology are due to the dictionary of Sevortian. I think nobody should ever use it. I think it's a bad dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
Because for the same reason that the Russian Turkologists knew the modern languages, but they had no idea about had no idea about Old Turkic, and therefore that Sevortian dictionary has lots and lots of mistakes, but also many hypothetical opinions, and also many views which use the other so-called the other Altaic languages for making Turkish etymologies. So I recommend not to use. Of course, Sevortian was a great scholar, but I would suggest not to use Sevortian's dictionary.
Okay, thank you for your opinion. Thank you. By the way, there is also this etymological dictionary of Altaic languages. So I would like to know also your opinion about that. Starostin, Dibo, Mudrak. Yeah.
No,
Starostin. Very good friend of mine. Very good friend of mine, but we don't agree.
Sorry, who was your friend? Starostin?
Anna Debo, who is in charge of that.
Anna Debo,
we don't agree. By the way, you will be in Berlin soon?
No, my Berlin work actually finished already. So in this July was the first. Yeah, no, yeah.
Because I will be in Berlin from the 19th. In a few days, I'm going to Berlin, and I mostly live in Berlin, actually.
No, what a pity. That's unfortunately I returned 1 week ago, and that was the final stage of my Berlin project. It would be a good opportunity to meet you. Sorry.
Hrach hocam, Mr. Martirosyan.
Yeah.
You were going to ask something different, but we had to interrupt. Please go on.
Okay. Do I have some 5 or 7 minutes to share some pictures on PowerPoint and talk about it?
Go ahead.
Sure. Let me make sure if you can.
If you make a co-host,
I think you can now share your screen.
Okay.
Can you give it a try?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you see now my
Yes.
screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this meeting, I would like to point out that there is a huge lack of communication between Armenian and Turkish scholarships. And of course, largely it is understandable because of all those political and tragic things which we are not going to mention, because we are now talking about the scientific and larger probably communication, and so we should have a conversation and a scientific discussion, etc. And I just want to present one example from each side, that lack of mutual communication can bring to a misfortunate and non-scientific issues or treatments, I would say, of an issue. So let's take one example from the Armenian side. We can see, for example, of course, this is not for foreign audience, but I just want to show the Acharyan's dialectal dictionary, which also Mr. Nişanyan mentioned. So 1913, and here we find in Sebastia dialect the word ten, which means vulva of a cow. And one of the greatest linguists of Armenian, he's really an amazing scholar, but because of a lack of knowledge or methodological patience into checking in Turkish or Persian or some other closer materials, then he tried to make deeper comparisons for this dialectal word ten with Greek sathe, penis, etc., etc. So as if from Indo-European tuva, which means to swell, and something like this. And actually some other scholars took up the same etymology, and this goes on and on. But actually, when one looks to the Sebastia material itself, then the author of Sebastia dialect dictionary puts in brackets Turkish. So the sources, how important is to use all the sources, and then this 1952 wonderful dialectal dictionary has this idea that this ten, the word ten, which means vulva of a cow, genitals of a cow, or womb of a cow, actually it should have been a Turkish word according to him. And unfortunately, the historical comparative linguists, like those who I mentioned, unlike Acharyan again. So here in the description of Hamshen dialect, he mentions that ten is Turkish borrowing, and that's it. And it means body. Yes, because body and vulva are very closely related. So we have several words in Armenian where the word for body becomes word for vulva. So this is a tabooistic, euphemistic, very well-known semantic shift. And then in his list of Turkish borrowings, Acharyan, sorry again to show the Armenian ones, but I will come now to the other screens. But then now we should be non-ignorant and to search deeper and larger, and then we look to the famous Derleme Sözlüğü, that is of course dialectal, very important voluminous dictionary, and then we find easily the word ten, and which has two meanings. And we have seen already that these both meanings are attested in Armenian different dialects. So it either means vücut, that is a body, or genital, so female sexual organ. So of course these words, we are talking about these words. And then we know that it's found also in Persian, body again, so from body to vulva, and also in other Iranian material, and it's of course Indo-Iranian word, tanu in Sanskrit, so it means body, and from Persian it was borrowed into Turkish, and Armenian dialects took up this word from Persian and Turkish. You see, this is a very typical, very good example when instead of looking, even great scholars, when they forget about the cautious, about the caution, and they instead of looking to closer regional data and also internal comparison, so they take this dialectal word, like this time this 10, and they treat as potentially archaic word. So instead of looking around, so and around, that is the same region, Sebastia, but then Turkish side, and Kars, Ardahan, etc. So in all these Turkish dialects, we do find evidence for this word. So this is from Armenian side, lack of knowledge or carefulness, and lack of communication, scientific conscience, right? Now I would like to make an example from the other side. So you probably know about this book, Yunus Altunkaya, Hemşince. This is a wonderful description of Hemşin vernacular, but it is an astonishing case, and I'm really very, very sad about this. Altunkaya describes the dialect of Armenian Hamshen. It's typically Armenian Hamshen dialect, not some vernacular Laz form or some mysterious language form, as the author says, as if it's a language fallen from the moon or something. So he found this mysterious language. So this is really very, very sad, because this is a very archaic and well-known and very well-described dialect, Armenian dialect of Hamshen region. And there are descriptions or papers devoted to this dialect in French, Georges Dumézil, in English, in German, Uwe Blessing, 2 monographs. Acharyan in Armenian produced a large volume on this. So there is huge literature about this. And this author says that Hamshen vernacular has not been described, and so our grammar is the first one to. So we found out this new language, so it's very important, etc., etc. But looking through every page of this description, which is again very good, because all the data. So I checked, and the material is really good, really interesting, and so I checked. And it's really reliable, but only there is this huge and extraordinary lack of knowledge, or I don't want to take guesses why the word Armenian is missing in this book. You see, so this is not a small paper. This is not a small thing. So this is a principal thing. So the author describes the Armenian dialect, totally Armenian, the vocabulary, numerals, pronouns, etc., etc. So everything, and not a single word about its Armenian origin. So you can see just a small fragment, but the whole book is like this. So again, a wonderful description of this dialect, but total ignorance, or I really don't want to judge whether it is due to ignorance or just deliberately keeping silent about the Armenian nature of this dialect. So I don't want to take part of these guesses, but in either option, so this is not good. Okay, so my conclusion, of course, I can bring tens of such examples from different sides. So, but my basic point is, which I would like to stress, that scholarship should be honest and very careful, and we should have scholarly discussion, honest discussion, and we should be aware of each other's scholarship. So this is really very important, and we can only gain from these mutual conversations and honest discussions. So this is the last point which I wanted to stress. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing up this example. I can bring you 100 more examples if you wish.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
About 6-7 years ago, I came upon a dissertation, a PhD thesis, which was about the Posha language of the province of Çankırı. You know the Posha.
Yeah, of course.
Poshas are Armenian-speaking gypsies. And apparently in the province of Çankırı, which is the middle of nowhere, it's in western Black Sea region, there is a Posha community and they speak a language of their own. And this young man wrote a dissertation about that language. It's clearly Armenian. It's an Armenian dialect, a fairly distorted Armenian dialect, a remote dialect, but an Armenian dialect. So I contacted him, says, are you aware that the word Armenian doesn't occur even once in the entire dissertation? I told him, are you aware of what you are doing? He said, of course I am. I know it is Armenian. So I couldn't, my dissertation wouldn't pass. It wouldn't be accepted in the university if I mentioned that it is Armenian. Of course I know it is Armenian.
Yeah, this is really very sad, yeah.
So it's censorship. And the censorship is not even a government policy. It's just cowardice. You know, people are afraid of each other.
Yeah.
He is afraid of his professor is afraid of his department chief is afraid of YÖK. They don't even dare ask the question of, may I mention the Armenian? Because, you know, it's dangerous. If you ask that, people will suspect you of not having sufficient national feeling. In dealing with place names, for example, there are thousands and thousands of Armenian place names in Turkey. I mean, just village names are about 3,000 of them. And beyond villages, smaller items, which are still used, the names are used. And of course, now it is fashionable for every village person, for everybody from everywhere, to mention the local culture, the local names, the local vocabulary. It's a very popular topic on social media, you know, Facebook pages, and they mention that this river is named such and such in our area, which not even one person in the hundreds or thousands even entertains the possibility that this must be Armenian. I don't know what it means, but it must be Armenian. That possibility does not occur to them. I mean, these people actually try to come up with the most contorted Turkish explanations. If that doesn't work, they'll say it is, you know, it's Hittite, or it is from the Byzantine language. God knows whatever. Or in Arabic, this word means, you know, a cow's vulva. But it will not occur to them that it's probably Armenian. Let's ask someone.
Yeah.
It is indeed very unfortunate that this miscommunication is the case. And while we are talking about this, let me say that next summer, we are planning to organize the second meeting of this linguistics camp at the Arkhé project in Şirince. And I hope that the circumstances would allow you both to come here to join us
in person.
In person here, so that we have a opportunity to rectify these issues and about these issues. in person, physically in Şirince. And let me put this as well with my from my heart.
Thank you very much. So it's a great pleasure. So let's keep in touch, and please inform about the developments, about the plans, and probably during the autumn it will be much clearer whether it would be physically possible. So I would really love to come.
Sure.
I will attend by online, I'm afraid. I'm a fugitive in Turkey. I cannot go back to Turkey unless there is an amnesty or something or other, or unless our dear president decides to forgive me. Other than that, I have to stay away. You are probably aware that the Arkhé project, this whole institution, was set up by my son and his friends. So Arsen Nişanyan is my son, who is the organizer and the founder, one of the founders, he is several people, of the Arkhé project in Şirince. I helped establish a mathematics school. I helped establish a theater school. Just as I was beginning to think about the philosophy school, I had to leave the scene. So now it's the next generation that is taking up the flag.
Arsen is now excavating at Sardis. That's
Yes.
why he's not with us, unfortunately, but I am sure that he's following this conversation online on YouTube.
My greetings to him, although I don't know him personally, but please pass my greetings to him. So it's this was a nice undertaking.
Shall we pass to the questions, or shall we give it a break? How is it going so far for you?
Can we finish it sometime soon?
Okay.
Actually, if I may, I think I have mentioned that later on I have another appointment, but still I have still some 15 minutes. So if there are questions, then I will be very glad to. 15 or 20 minutes still is possible. So
Mr. Nişanyan, is it also okay for you if we take
Go
one
ahead,
or two
go
questions?
ahead.
Okay. Then I will leave the floor to those who have some questions.
Hello, I have a question. I mean, Hrach can also consider this question. This is a general question about dictionaries. A couple of months ago, in a Sunday chat, a person asked Sevan Hoca the question of what will happen after you die to your dictionaries, and Sevan Hoca said, "I'll try to pass it on." Is there anything clear on that, or is there going to be something? Because this is really an astonishing project. It shouldn't. How do I say this? Die with you, if you get what I mean. I mean, how should that work? How will that work?
I'm bad at collective work. I'm very bad at delegating responsibility. I'm a loner by nature. So I've been working on these 3 dictionaries for the last almost 30 years, 28 years. And apart from the content of the dictionaries, I give great importance to their method of publication. Paper publication is really something of the past. Online publication is really what's going to drive these things. So over the years, we have set up 3 highly complicated, really very detailed labyrinthine websites, 3 of them, so that the full content of all 3 of my dictionaries are fully available to everyone in the world, free of charge. And as a matter of fact, much more is available online than it is on paper. Now, these websites require full-time work. Even when right now I'm working on other projects more than these, I still spend hours and hours every day, 7 days a week, every day, including Saturday and Sunday, on the websites. And it's my experience that these things, if you leave them alone untouched for about 6 months, they'll start to die. That's the way with the digital world. You have to keep it constantly fed. It's like an animal. You have to feed it all the time. There are some young people who are helping me with the technical infrastructure. In the past, I used to write my own code to the computer. I'm also a computer fanatic, but I can no longer do that. There are some young people, but still, I don't know how I can turn this into a legacy. I really hope that my sons would be able to take it over, but they don't seem to be interested. Probably they're right, because as long as I'm around, I'm going to be a pain in the ass. But somehow this has to be transferred to the next generation. I have no idea how you can do that. We talked to the Gulbenkian Foundation, as a matter of fact, to see if they might be interested. It's not like in the past. They don't have that much money, and they didn't seem interested. Maybe we didn't know how to approach them. Maybe we approached the wrong people. But somehow, I would be honored if the Turkish government somehow recognizes the importance of this work. I know for a fact that people at the Interior Ministry of the Turkish government actually use my place name dictionary. It's used as a work of reference in Turkish courts in property cases. So it is a work of reference. It is a service to the Turkish public. I doubt that they will have that sort of intellectual and moral flexibility to look at this work. The reason why I thought about the philosophy school in 2013, 2014, that was my big next project. Philosophy in this case includes everything other than mathematics. So it's basically a general term for the humanities. So the reason I thought of this project was exactly this, so that there would be some young people arriving and working on various projects. I would get to know them, and I would be able to establish a little team and then tell them, look, just take this shit from me and do it. I've been unable to realize that dream. I don't know. I'm pessimistic.
If I have, I mean, it's close to what you thought. If you would like to listen, I have a small suggestion or a thought about what could be done about this. Actually, I didn't know you planned a philosophy school there, but I thought of, since it's technically you built the village, I guess.
Mathematics.
There could be, for instance, I plan to study linguistics. I plan to reach places, I guess. I plan to do things about linguistics. Maybe we could, maybe in Arkhé, maybe in Nesim Matematikköy, we could establish a linguistics school, and people could be raised there. There could be a head of that school who could run it. And that could be, a thing that could go on. Maybe that could be done.
I really wish that could be done. And that was exactly my idea in 2013, which has been 10 years ago. And ever since then, I've always dreamt of one day I will come back and then pick it up where I leave. It's not something very easy that we are talking about, because this kind of work really requires a certain personality and really a degree of madness in your mind. In other words, great discipline, great inatın İngilizcesi neydi? In English, determination, stubbornness. Yeah, you know, you need perseverance and stubbornness and unlimited, you know, if I don't do this to perfection, I'm going to die sort of feeling. I have to do it to perfection. And for that, in order to acquire that sort of attitude, I think you need for at least a couple years, for a while, you need a slave driver, somebody to really push you to your limits. Without that, it's very difficult, because I've met a lot of young people. I've met a lot of young people who have really helped me for a while with this or that little task. I have a young man who lives in Austria who constantly sends me the newest material on Iranian Indo-Europeanism, Europeanists and suggestions for various sources. But this has to be done with discipline. Without discipline, it doesn't work. It doesn't go anywhere. So it's a difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing.
Hopefully someday one of us, or maybe someone not here, could pick up the project where you left it and continue it. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
If you have time,
Yeah.
I have a brief follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
I think this question is for Mr. Martirosyan, since most of our like people here and also our YouTube followers are also followers of Mr. Nişanyan. So my question is, Mr. Martirosyan, why do you think like Armenians, and also like we have Mr. Erdal here, why do you think like Turkish minorities are so into, especially Turkish linguistics?
I didn't quite understand your question. Turkish minorities, where?
Yeah, like,
why do Armenians and even Jews and even Greeks, rather than Turks, have this special interest in the Turkish language?
This is a tough question. So Armenians were always up to recording things and being interested in languages, and we can even remember examples from the history, 13th century, Kyriakos Ganzaketsi and some other authors in the Mongol period. So they were interested, they hated the enemies, yeah, because they devastated the country and made the slavery, etc. But then they keep on describing things. So I cannot say why in some tradition it is thriving and in others not very much. But so this is what we find a lot in Armenian tradition. So authors are interested very much, even describing the language of the enemies. Like I said, concerning the Mongol time, and they produced word lists which are now very, very valuable, because on the proper language there are words which have earliest records in Armenian rather than the language itself. Or if we remember the case of Moses Khorenatsi, he produced a history of Armenians, a very well-known work, very important one, and giving this or that event, describing certain events. He gives material both from Persian and Greek sources and materials. But even though he does not like Persian material, so he says, so I don't know why people are interested also in these pagan Persian things rather than beautiful classical Hellenistic or this Greek things which I admire. But anyway, he gives also those data which he does not admire, like Persian mythology. All right, so I can only remember about certain examples, but it's a tough question. So how deep can be this understood or explained? So maybe Mr. Nişanyan can give some more cogent thoughts about this.
Why do the Irish write the best English novels? Now we shouldn't think in contemporary current terms, because in the 19th century, which is really the peak of Armenians doing Turkish linguistic works, there isn't much hostility. There isn't any hostility. Turks are not regarded as the enemy in the 1820s, 1840s, 1850s, 1870s. That's a time when automatically the Armenians assume the Turks are the administrative elite. They are the empire. They are our empire. They speak a different language, they have a different religion, but they are our empire. And we, as the Armenians, have a specific role in that empire. We are their scribes. We are their translators. We are the ones who will write the French to Turkish, Turkish to French dictionary. That dictionary can only be written by an Armenian, because that is their function in the Ottoman Empire. Keep in mind that these Armenians, up until the 20th century, the overwhelming majority of the Armenians were bilingual in Turkish. In other words, they knew Turkish. Even in the Iranian Empire, they spoke Turkish. Even in the Russian Empire, they knew Turkish. And of course, in the Ottoman Empire, all of them knew Turkish. Most of them were probably more fluent in Turkish than they were in Armenian. So it was their language. It was their upper language. It was their government language, as opposed to Armenian, which was their secondary language. It was their lower status language. This balance began to change towards the end of the 19th century, when the Armenians went through a period of intense educational reform. So the Armenians became far more educated than the Turks and began to think, well, our language is superior to Turkish. So we have to maybe eliminate Turkish words from our language because Turkish is lower. But that is really the end of the 19th century. Before that, until then, when Hindoğlu was writing the Turkish dictionary, when others were writing their Turkish dictionaries and Turkish, French, Turkish, German, Turkish, English dictionaries, it was their function within the Ottoman Empire. They had a role in the Ottoman Empire, and that was being the scribes, being the classifiers.
Mm-hmm. By the way, if I may to add something, which also partly concerns to your comments, the 19th century Armenian scholarship, even those scholars who produced the important dictionaries and other philological works living abroad, they recognized the spread of Turkish among regional Armenians, and in their, for example, the Haykazyan Bargirk, they constantly, so they produce the work in Europe, right? And they constantly, apart from Greek and Latin counterparts of concerning word, they give also Turkish forms, so that people becomes aware of that. So Turkish, Persian, and so systematically. So this is also a peculiar thing.
I've used it very frequently, and the Haykazyan dictionary is one of the most important sources in materials on early 19th century Turkish,
of
because
course, yeah.
modern Turkish dictionaries do not start before the middle of the 19th century. And Haygazyan, which was published in 1830s, 1836, is it something like that?
36, 37, the second volume. Yeah.
36, it has an extensive Turkish vocabulary. Every word has its equivalent, and some of the usages there are very interesting. But Turkish dictionaries did not catch up with the full spectrum of meanings until really the end of the 19th century.
Mhm.
So that when you look at Haygazyan, you find enormous amount of material on the original, on the early 19th century Turkish usages. And of course, in order to have access to Haygazyan, you have to know both Armenian and the old Turkish scripts. And I think there are a total of 50 people in the whole world who can do both of them. So it is a little bit of a marginal taste.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. We have yet another question if you would like to entertain. Last one, obviously.
Hi, first of all, thank you both for the beautiful conversation. Actually, I had asked the following question a couple of days ago to Mr. Martirosyan, but I would like to repeat it in the presence of our YouTube audience and also in the presence of Mr. Nişanyan and Mr. Erdal. Would you consider it helpful to use these Parthian loanwords in Armenian to construct the evolution of modern northwestern Iranic languages like Kurdish and Zazaki?
I heard you with interruptions, but I hope I understood. So this is question to me, right?
Yes, actually both of you. I would like to learn both of your ideas.
Okay, so your question was with interruptions. Do I have said correctly that you are interested about the northwestern Iranian, the Armenian contribution to northwestern Iranian
the languages?
knowledge,
Yes,
the languages. Yes.
So it's
yes, as I mentioned earlier, the contribution is really huge because of those obvious reasons which I already mentioned, that very often the words are not recorded in Parthian or in any other northwestern words, but Armenian borrowed and saved these words from out of being lost, right? So this is an this does not concern a couple of or even dozens of words, but really many such words. And Armenian data are also transparent in the matter that we can distinguish between Parthian and Middle Persian borrowings. So for obvious phonological reasons. For example, intervocalic de, one of the same word, coming into Armenian through northwestern Iranian becomes re, because in Parthian this intervocalic de becomes fricative the, and then this passes to Armenian re. So this is a peculiar and interesting thing, but it can be traced back systematically. But in the same position, the behaves differently in southwestern Iranian languages, becoming ye there. But there is yet another Middle Persian development. According to this, it becomes her. And for all these three reflexes, we have systematically many examples. And we have even some wonderful classical examples in which one and the same word has all three reflections in Armenian. Can you imagine that? For example, the Iranian word for army, spada, it is borrowed in Armenian into three ways: spaha, spara, and spy, all meaning army. And some of them with compounds. Sparapet, which means general, so very old 5th century attestations, etc. Sparapet, but next to this we have spahapet and also spy, spyapet or spy. So this is a wonderful mirror where we find reflected all these dialectal things. Like another example, a very typical one also, Sardar and Salar, because we know that Old Iranian rd becomes l in Armenian. So like Sard is year. So we have Navasard, not really attested in Parthian, the new year, Navasard. So like modern Novruz, right? But with another word. But this Sard word, which becomes, which keeps its original form through Parthian, but in Persian it becomes Sal. Sard becomes Sal. So Sardar, general, another word, but with the same phonological thing, becomes Salar in Western, Southern Iranian. So again, Armenian has both these reflections. So there are several issues. Of course, within a couple of minutes, we cannot express all, but in my current project, which I am working on already for a considerable while, but then I will work also some 2 or 3 years. Then all these things will be systematically dealt with in my book, because it will be very, very large, and it will consist of 2 parts. One would be theoretical part, and it will deal with all the theoretical issues, like, for example, how to distinguish between native Armenian words and Iranian borrowings. So, and another thing, how to distinguish between Western, Northwestern Iranian borrowings into Armenian from Southwestern, etc., etc. So one week part will be about this phonological and morphological theoretical things, about every aspect of Armenian and Iranian linguistics, linguistic relationship. And the second, the main and much larger part will be the corpus of the etymological dictionary itself. So if you will have later more specific questions concerning several loan words in and involving data from Kurdish or Parthian or some other Northwestern or some other Iranian dialect, then please feel free to communicate, and we can discuss details about those words and theoretical issues.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm afraid this is the end of our conversation. And on behalf of the Arkhé project, I would like to thank Hrach Martirosyan, Sevan Nişanyan, and Marcel Erdal for being with us today. Let me finish by reiterating my hope that as soon as possible, we will meet in physical format here, physically here, to talk more on these subjects, and hopefully establish a school, a linguistics school, in the way that Mr. Nişanyan dreams of. Thank you very much.
Does Professor Martirosyan have any notion about where you are and what Şirince is? Have you explained this to him?
Yeah,
Yes.
Before our first meeting, I explained Professor Martirosyan, and please, Hrach Hocam, if you'd like to add.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they are in a village. They are in a village in a remote hill, so somewhere up in the mountains,
and
in a very interesting region. And as soon as Hamid told me about this region, then I immediately thought of Artemis Temple, which is not very far
Yes.
from your place, right?
They're
So,
right
it's
near the Artemis
magnificent,
Temple.
magnificent location, of course. So,
And from the hill that's opposite them, there's a hill where there's an ancient monument of a rock tomb. On top of that hill, you can simultaneously see the three Ionian cities of Ephesus, Samos, and Miletus. So it's really the heart of the world. It's the center of the world.
Yes, yes, so wonderful.
In this hill, out of this, inside this hill, at some point in the year 2006, my good friend Ali Nesin, who is a mathematician, who is the top mathematician of Turkey, internationally known, he's an old friend of mine ever since university. So he said he wanted to establish a summer school, a summer camp for his mathematicians. I said, all right, okay, here's a nice abandoned field, let's buy it and build some simple buildings. Totally primitive. I mean, it's a sort of village which we built. People would come there and say, look, this must have existed here for hundreds of years. How come we didn't know about it? It started out with 3 buildings and then expanded into almost a town, so that now they have thousands of students every year. It has become one of the most fascinating educational institutions in Turkey, but they teach mathematics, which I find terribly boring. So it has become a large town. It has become a town with several hundred people, several hundred residents, and almost 40 buildings. It's become a large campus built in the form of a traditional Mediterranean village. Next to that, some other people came to me and said, we are interested in a theater school. I said, okay. What do you want? We want a large internal courtyard. All right, let's build an internal courtyard for you. And we ended up building an old Roman or Ottoman or quasi-Roman and quasi-Ottoman large courts with arches, etc. It turned also into a huge establishment. And the third in the series was going to be my philosophy school, actually philosophy and theology. I'm very interested in theology. And I think for Turkey, it's right now the most important field because young people are especially interested in that. Religion is very much in the minds of most of people of the younger generation, so offering them something outside the traditional framework, a real school of theology, a school that would explore theological matters with an open mind, is, I think, very important. So that's what I was planning to build as the third in the series. However, all these buildings that we built are entirely illegal. We never got any permission to build them. We said, we want to build them, so we built them. And of course, no government likes that sort of thing. So they said, who is responsible for this shit? They said, oh, Sevan, he did it. We didn't do it.
I've got to tell you that Hrach Martirosyan is also familiar with this model, as he has been organizing a hiking summer school of Armenology in Armenian mountains for 15 years, I guess, right?
Yes,
actually,
since 2008. So actually 15 years, yes.
Wonderful.
And okay.
So that's the sort of place that they are at.
Okay. So it has been a pleasure, and I wish you good luck in all your undertakings, and I would love to be a part of them again. And so please keep in touch.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Hocam Marcel Bey, sevgilerimi iletiyorum. Görüşmek üzere. Sağ olun, var olun.
Evet.
Geldiğiniz için.
Çok çok güzel. Burası dünyanın en güzel yeri. Bunu da söylemek istiyorum. Hakikaten mükemmel.
Neresi?
Yani-
Şirince mi?
Sadece fiziki bakımdan değil, hem ruhi bakımdan mükemmel bir yer. Hakikaten.
Teşekkürler, çok sağ olun. Gençler sayesinde. Hadi Allah'a ısmarladık. Görüşmek üzere.
Okay. İyi geceler.
İyi geceler.
Her iki sen.